At my daughter's wedding, they told me who let this homeless get in. So I left with the caterer's check. I had not even caught my breath from the walk across the parking lot when the first words of the night cut straight through me like broken glass. I stepped 3 feet inside the wedding hall, 3 feet, and before I could even close my purse, a sharp voice rang out. "Who let this woman in? She looks like she's here to clean up after." I looked up and saw her, Kiera Solis, my daughter Celine's closest friend, wearing a mauve bridesmaid dress that shimmered under the lights. Her face twisted into something between disgust and amusement as she stared at me like I had crawled out from beneath one of the tables. A woman beside her scrunched her nose and whispered far louder than necessary, "Is she homeless?" Then came the voice I had dreaded most, calm, clipped, and full of quiet cruelty. "Escort her away from the entrance. She does not belong in the photos." Vivienne Sorel, my daughter's soon-to-be mother-in-law, a woman who had looked at me like an inconvenience from the first day Celine introduced us. She waved her manicured hand at the security guard as if shooing a stray animal off her porch. And that was how my daughter's wedding greeted me, like a stain someone needed to scrub away. I stood there, trying to steady myself. People brushed past me, perfume and cologne swirling around me, and for a moment I felt the old instinct to apologize for existing, the same instinct that had been beaten into me by years of cleaning other people's floors, other people's bathrooms, other people's messes. The hall sparkled golden lights, crystal glasses, white lilies arranged in tall vases. I saw Celine's photographer adjusting some reflective board near the aisle. Everything was curated, polished, expensive. And there I was, wearing a beige dress I had ironed 3 times that morning, hoping it would look newer than it was. My shoes were scuffed on the sides, no matter how hard I had scrubbed them. I knew exactly how I looked in their eyes, but I forced myself not to shrink. The security guard approached. "Ma'am, the staff entrance is around the back." I raised my chin. "I am not staff. I am the mother of the bride." He frowned, scanning me slowly, the way people do when they think you are lying. "Are you sure, ma'am?" A line like that should have been funny in another life. In this one, it just hollowed me out a little more. I took a breath that shook more than I wanted it to. "I am here for my daughter, Celine Hartley." 2 guests passing by snickered. The Hartley girl wouldn't have a mother like this. Their words echoed the same tone I had heard all my life at schools, at store counters, at every job where people pretended not to notice me unless they needed something cleaned. And before I go further, if you feel that justice deserves to be heard, if you want stories like mine not to fade into the dark corners people try to shove us into, smash that hype button. Let my voice travel farther than the place they tried to silence me in. Your support keeps these truths alive. Thank you for listening. The guard stepped closer, but just then a door to the bridal suite opened and all the bridesmaids froze. The music softened, cameras stopped clicking, and Celine appeared. My daughter looked beautiful, radiant even. Her white dress shimmered under the lights, the train flowing like a sheet of moonlight behind her. For half a second, her eyes met mine, and something flickered there: recognition, fear, shame. I could not tell. Then she looked away. "She is not supposed to be here," she said quickly, turning to Thatcher's family. "She was not invited." The words hit me harder than anything Kiera or the guests had thrown at me. She was choosing them. She was choosing the version of herself she had spent years building, a version where I did not exist, where she had no mother who scrubbed floors for a living. Vivienne stepped closer, tilting her chin downward as she examined me. "Is this the guardian you told us about? The woman who raised you out of pity?" "Guardian, not mother." Celine's voice shrank. "She is complicated." Vivienne waved her hand. "Then remove her. We cannot have this kind of disruption." The guard moved again and gently touched my elbow. "This way, ma'am." The wedding guests whispered loudly as he guided me toward the back hallway. Imagine having a mother like that. Poor Celine. She deserves better. I kept walking. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I had learned long ago that sometimes words do nothing but make the humiliation louder. When we reached the door to the staff corridor, I paused and turned back. Celine stood beneath a ring light, bridesmaids fussing over her veil, avoiding my eyes like I was something dangerous. In that moment, I felt something inside me shift, the quiet breaking of a bone you did not know was fractured. On the night my daughter married, I whispered inside myself, they asked who had let me in. They saw me as an intruder, and my own child took the first step away from me. And that was only the beginning of the night. People think humiliation begins in big moments like a wedding hall, with strangers staring and whispering. But for me, it began decades earlier, in the quiet hours of the night, when I pushed my cleaning cart down empty hallways and felt the sour burn of bleach working its way into the cracks of my skin. That smell, sharp, bitter, unforgettable, was the scent of my life. It clung to me no matter how many showers I took, no matter how long I soaked my hands in warm water to bring back some softness. I worked nights because it paid a little more, and because it let me be home when Celine woke up. I wanted her to have mornings with me. That mattered. I remember returning home at sunrise, shoes damp, uniform stiff, my muscles aching in places I did not have names for. Celine would run toward me, arms wide, pressing her little face into my neck without ever mentioning the smell. Back then, she did not care. Children love without conditions. But childhood innocence has an expiration date. When Celine entered elementary school, it began tiny comments, whispered jokes, then open ridicule. I arrived once to drop off the lunch she had forgotten. A boy at the door pinched his nose dramatically and announced, "Your mom smells like toilets." A group of kids burst into laughter. Celine's cheeks turned red so quickly I thought she was burning up. I reached out to touch her shoulder. She jerked away so hard she nearly fell backward. "Just go," she hissed. I left the lunch on the steps and walked away, pretending I did not hear the snickering behind me. That was the first time my daughter recoiled from me. It would not be the last. After my husband died, the little support I had from his side of the family evaporated. They were not wealthy, but they carried themselves as if decency and compassion were luxuries reserved for people who could afford them. They blamed me for his death as if grief had an address and my name was written on it. They whispered words like, bad luck, misfortune, the kind of woman who drains a man's life. They refused to let their children play with Celine. "Stay away from her mother," I overheard my sister-in-law say once. "She is poor and uneducated, and she drags bad energy with her." I would have taken the insult myself. God knows I had taken plenty by then, but hearing it directed toward Celine carved something out of me I never got back. I saw my daughter listening, absorbing those words the way children absorb the world, quietly, deeply, permanently. She grew more self-conscious after that, more careful, more ashamed. When she started middle school, I took a job at one of the administrative buildings on campus. It meant I could pick up extra hours and be closer to her. At least, that was what I told myself. The truth was simpler. It was the best job I could find. The uniform was bright blue, impossible to hide. The mop and broom were standard issue. Everyone knew exactly what I was. One afternoon, as I carried a trash bag out the side door, a group of kids snapped pictures of me with their phones. They laughed, pointing, whispering my daughter's name. That night, a photo of me in my uniform circulated online with a caption that read, "Is this Celine's mom? Gross." It spread faster than colds in winter. The following morning, Celine stormed up to me before class even started. Her eyes were full of anger. I did not yet understand. "Why do you always show up?" she shouted. "You ruin everything." Everything? Me? I could not even manage a reply. My throat closed up behind my ribs like someone had reached inside and twisted it. I wanted to tell her I worked there for her, that everything I did was for her, that every hour on my feet, every cleaning fluid stain on my clothes, every calloused fingerprint on my hands, all of it was for her. But the words stayed lodged inside me. I did not know how to speak without making things worse. I had already become the problem in her eyes. As Celine grew older, her embarrassment hardened into something sharper. She started talking about successful people she admired, the kind who wrote books about how they had climbed out of poverty with grit and brilliance. She quoted them with a religious fervor. "You do not stay stuck," she would say, flipping through those glossy pages. "You rise." But when she looked at me, I saw the truth in her eyes. She believed I had failed that rise. I had stayed stuck. I had become an example of what not to be. She did not say it at first. Shame rarely announces itself. It seeps through silence. The turning point came one afternoon when she was in high school. I had walked onto the campus during a fire drill, searching for her. She glared at me as if I had brought a spotlight down on us. One of her classmates whispered, "Why is the janitor talking to you?" Celine's face collapsed into mortification. Later that night, she refused to sit with me at dinner. She picked at her food, staring at her plate as if the peas would rearrange themselves into a different life. And then came the words I feared. The words that told me something inside her had snapped clean. "You are not really my mom. You are just my guardian." She said it without anger, without emotion. That made it worse. It was said the way one might correct a typo. A guardian, a placeholder, a name you give a person you want to distance yourself from. I felt my chest tighten so hard I thought I might fold over. I had carried her for 9 months, fed her with money I did not have, worked shifts that stole my sleep so she could dream bigger dreams than I ever had. I stitched her clothes when they tore. I walked her home in the rain. I stayed up at night listening for her footsteps, praying she would come home safe. And yet somehow, somewhere along the way, the word mother had become too large for me to keep. That night, while she slept, I sat alone at our small kitchen table, hands clasped together, staring at the dark window. The reflection that stared back looked like a woman disappearing, fading at the edges. It was then I realized something that hollowed me even more deeply than poverty ever had. Celine was beginning to rewrite her memories, and I was being written out of them. On the day she first called me her guardian, I whispered to the empty room. I knew she had started erasing me long before the wedding ever did. People often assume that mothers who stay quiet do so because they have nothing to say. The truth is much simpler. We stay quiet because we are too tired from carrying the weight of others. My silence was never emptiness. It was sacrifice. And most of it happened during the years when Celine was preparing for college, a time she now remembers as her own triumph, untouched by the hands that held her up. When Celine was a senior in high school, I knew college was the only way she would escape the kind of life I had lived. I had never attended one. I barely understood how the application system worked. But I learned. I went to the school counselor's office during her free periods, holding a notebook full of scribbles, questions, and sticky notes that looked like a patchwork quilt of confusion. The counselors spoke quickly, using terms I had never heard before: FAFSA, grants, work-study, dependency override, income verification. I nodded even when I did not understand. Then I went home and stayed up with dictionaries, online tutorials, and government websites until the screen blurred and my eyes burned. When it came time to fill out the FAFSA, I sat at our small kitchen table with the old laptop we had bought secondhand. My hands trembled each time I typed our income numbers. I reread each question 3 times, terrified I would make a mistake that would cost Selene her chance. The form asked whether she had a living parent who supported her financially. I checked the box for single-parent household, and my name, Morella Quinn, filled the guardian section automatically. I remember staring at those lines for a long time, wondering if one day Celine would pretend they had never existed. It took hours, and I felt like I was navigating a maze built for people far more educated than me. When I finally reached the last page, I hesitated. Signing electronically felt like signing a contract with the future, a future I hoped she would let me be a part of. My finger hovered over the mouse, shaking, and then I clicked. It was done. She would get tuition assistance. She would get grants for low-income families. She would go further than I ever could. And she did. But the version of that story she told the world was very different. I did it on my own. No family support. I worked for everything I have. The first time I saw those words, they were on her social media page, under a photo of her holding her college acceptance letter. The comments showered her with admiration. Self-made. Inspirational. Stronger than your circumstances. I sat on the couch reading them, my heart sinking slowly. like it was being lowered into cold water. I typed nothing. I corrected nothing. I simply closed the laptop, folded my hands, and stared at the wall until my vision blurred. Silence was the only thing I knew how to give. During those college years, I picked up more cleaning shifts not because Celine asked, but because tuition rose, textbooks grew more expensive, and she needed an apartment near campus. I worked at an office building downtown. On the night shifts, the young professionals there often stayed late, talking loudly in the break rooms. They spoke about investments, stocks, IPOs, options. One night, I overheard two employees excitedly discussing their company's growth. "Invest early," one of them said. "This company could be huge in a few years." I was sweeping behind them, pretending not to listen, but the words tugged at me. Invest early. I had never invested in anything, not stocks, not retirement accounts, not even a dependable future. I did not know how. But that night, I asked one of the Kinder employees if ordinary people could buy shares in the company. He blinked, surprised, but he explained it slowly, patiently. I wrote the instructions on a napkin I kept in my apron pocket. It took weeks of saving, but eventually I bought a very small amount of stock. It was nothing to wealthy people. But to me, it was all the courage I had. Years later, the company expanded into a successful chain, the same chain that owned the wedding venue Celine chose. My shares remained small, but early shareholders were granted certain protective rights. Rights I did not fully understand at the time, rights I never imagined I would use. While I was learning the language of risk and investment, Celine was learning the language of reinvention. She started dating Thatcher Rhymes, a man from a family that treated wealth the way others treat weather, something they expected to be good. He drove her to restaurants where the napkins were folded like swans. He introduced her to friends who spoke about vacations in the same tone I used to speak about grocery sales. Slowly, Celine drifted to a place where I could no longer reach her. She began using the last name Hartley, the name from her father's side, more often. She said it sounded cleaner, more professional, easier for people to remember. She said it lightly, as if rehearsed, as if it were fact. The night I learned this, my breath left me. I read her words again and again, searching for something, maybe remorse, maybe hesitation, maybe a trace of the girl who used to hug me even when I smelled like bleach. There was nothing. Still, I tried to stay in her life. I tried in the only ways I knew, quietly, gently, without forcing myself in. One winter evening, I brought her a sweater I had knitted and a small box of pastries from the bakery she liked as a child. I went to her apartment, full of hope that maybe she would let me inside for a cup of tea, maybe for a few minutes of conversation, maybe for a reminder that I was still her mother in some quiet corner of her heart. But the door opened, and it was Vivienne Sorel standing there. She looked me up and down, her expression tight. "We do not accept unannounced visitors," she said. "This is not appropriate." Before I could respond, she stepped back and closed the door. The latch clicked with a finality that stunned me. Behind the door, I heard footsteps, Celine's footsteps, but not once did she call out to me. Not once did she try to open the door again. I stood in that hallway holding the pastries and the sweater until my fingers went numb from the cold. That was the moment I understood something I had been too afraid to admit. I had spent Celine's whole life opening doors for her doors she would have never reached without me, yet she had learned to close every one of them in my face. I opened every door for her, I whispered to myself as I walked away that night. And she closed all of them before I could step through even one. The staff room was colder than the hallway, though a fryer in the kitchen next door kept sending waves of heat through the thin wall. The smell of oil and detergent clung to the air, mixing with the clattering of pans and the metallic ring of trays being stacked. I sat on a folding chair near the corner, my purse on my lap, my hands intertwined so tightly the knuckles went white. I could hear the wedding music faintly through the walls, violins, laughter, the sound of champagne glasses being lifted for photographs I would never appear in. It was strange to feel so close to my daughter's celebration and yet be pushed so far out of it that not even my shadow was welcome. I stared at the concrete floor, its gray surface chipped from years of carts and crates scraping across it. The room hummed with the rhythm of foot traffic. Caterers brushed past me, some glancing with polite curiosity, others pretending they did not see me at all. I had been invisible in many rooms before, but being invisible at your own child's wedding carries a different weight, a heavier one. It presses against the ribs, squeezes something inside until it hurts to breathe. I still remembered the hours I spent trying to wash the faint bleach scent from the fabric. I remembered hoping Celine would notice I tried. I knew now she had hoped the opposite, that I would not show up at all. The door swung open suddenly. Vivienne Sorel stepped in first, spotless in her ivory blazer, her pearls gleaming like small, cold teeth. She glanced at me as if I were a misplaced object someone needed to tuck away. "This room is for employees," she said flatly, "not guests." I should have said I was a guest. I should have said I was the mother of the bride, but my voice caught in my throat. I had said it once already that night and been treated like a liar. Repeating it felt like begging for humiliation. Thatcher Rhymes walked in behind his mother. His expression, though less sharp than hers, carried the same undertone of irritation. "We do not want drama today," he said. "Celine has enough to focus on." Drama. I was drama. To them, my presence was not a mother attending her daughter's life milestone. To them, I was an inconvenience, something messy and embarrassing, something that did not match the story they wanted to tell the world. Before I could gather myself, Celine walked through the doorway. Her dress shimmered even in the dim, fluorescent light layers of satin and lace flowing from her waist like a river. Her veil cascaded down her back, and the makeup artist had painted her face with soft tones that made her look almost porcelain. For a moment, I forgot every painful thing that had happened. Instinct took over. The instinct only mothers understand, the one that survives humiliation and heartbreak and long nights of doubt. I stood up. My voice cracked, but I managed a smile. "You look beautiful, baby." Time froze for one heartbeat. Her eyes flickered recognition, guilt, and something else that vanished too quickly to name. Then her expression hardened into a surface smooth enough to reflect the people around her. "You were not invited, Morella." Morella. Not mom. Not even mother. My name, thrown at me like a soft slap. I felt something inside me slip, a small thread coming undone from a seam that had held me together for years. I swallowed the hurt, but it did not sink. It stayed lodged in my chest, sharp and unavoidable. Vivienne's eyes darted to her son, then back to Celine. They were waiting to see whether she would maintain the image she had built for herself, the well-curated daughter of a respectable family, the woman whose parents were conveniently gone so her CV would appear clean, her backstory inspiring, her presence untainted by my kind of life. Celine lowered her voice, leaning toward her mother-in-law. "I wish she never existed." I was not supposed to hear it, but I did. Every word, every syllable. And hearing it felt like the ground cracked beneath me. My daughter's voice, my child whom I carried for 9 months, whom I fed with money I did not have, whom I protected with bruised palms and sleepless nights, wished I had never existed. I kept my face still, because breaking in front of them would have given them another thing to call pathetic. But inside, something tore. A quiet tear, the kind fabric makes before it gives way completely. I had always thought Celine was ashamed of my poverty. I thought the bleach smell on my clothes, the calloused state of my hands, the second-hand shoes, the tired eyes, that those things embarrassed her. But in that moment I realized it was not about embarrassment. She did not just wish I were different. She wished I had never been. The staff member beside me cleared his throat lightly, signaling he was ready to escort me elsewhere. Vivienne gave him a small nod, confirming it. As he placed a hand on my arm again, more gently this time, as if he realized a little too late that I was not an intruder, I rose to my feet. I heard whispers as we stepped out of the room. Imagine having a mother like that. No wonder Celine never talks about her. She deserved better parents. Each comment was like a tiny blade, not deep enough to kill, but sharp enough to slice. The hallway seemed longer on the way back. I felt the walls closing in slightly, as if they, too, wanted me out. When the staff door closed behind me, the sounds of the wedding swelled again, clinking silverware, laughter, applause for photographs I would never see. I stood there in the doorway, watching Celine through the crack between the wall and the swinging door. Her bridesmaids surrounded her, adjusting her veil. A photographer lifted her chin slightly, asking her to tilt her face toward the chandelier. She looked like she belonged in every corner of that room. She looked like the kind of woman who had everything she ever dreamed of, as long as she pretended the woman who raised her was dead. She never once looked toward the door. That was when I felt a presence beside me. I looked up to see a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, holding out a plastic cup of water. Her name tag read Piper Wynne. Her eyes were gentle in a way I had not seen all evening. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she asked softly. The question was simple, but it cut straight through my chest. No one had asked me that in years, not without judgment behind the words. Her voice had no judgment at all. I took the cup, my hand brushing hers, and answered honestly. "I have been okay for 68 years, I said, hearing my own bitterness for the first time. "That is the problem." Piper sat down on the chair beside me without hesitation. It startled me, a stranger choosing to sit next to someone who, minutes earlier, had been treated like dirt under expensive shoes. She looked at the wedding bouquet pinned to my dress. "Are you family?" I stared at the floor before forcing myself to say it out loud. "I am the bride's mother." Her eyes widened. "You? But they said you—" "I know what they said," I cut in gently. "I heard it all." Piper's face twisted with anger, not at me, but for me. A stranger was angrier on my behalf than my own daughter. That alone felt like a revelation. "Do you need help, ma'am?" she asked. "Yes," I said, standing slowly. "Could you call your manager, please?" She nodded immediately and hurried away. My pulse thudded in my ears. I had not asked for anything, not respect, not space, not acknowledgement in years. But tonight something in me had cracked open. Something that refused to shrink back into silence. Minutes later, Damien Rook stepped into the room. The venue manager, tall, stiff, shoulders squared like he had swallowed a rulebook for breakfast. His tone was clipped, professional, distant. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" he asked, clearly expecting a complaint about the temperature or food. "Yes," I said. My voice did not shake. "There is a problem with the contract." His eyebrows rose a fraction. "The contract?" He sounded impatient, as if this were an inconvenience. I reached into my purse and pulled out a worn manila envelope, edges softened by time and handling. I handed it to him. "This is the original deposit agreement, signed by me." Damien scanned the papers lazily at first. Then his eyes sharpened, his posture stiffened. He went silent, his expression tightened. He swallowed. "I need to call someone." When he hurried out of the room, Piper looked at me nervously. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" "The truth," I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "And the truth tends to scare people who have been lying." Within minutes, the door opened again, and a different man stepped inside. He was older, silver-haired, wearing a dark suit that fit too naturally to be rented. His presence quieted the room instantly. His name tag read Harlan Dre. He extended his hand to me with unexpected warmth. "Miss Quinn," he said, "my staff tells me we have something to discuss." No one had called me Miss Quinn with respect in years. I felt myself straighten a little. Harlan opened the envelope, reviewing the documents with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades unpicking corporate knots. He tapped his finger on the first page. "This is your signature." "Yes." "And you paid the initial deposit?" "Yes." He nodded, cross-checked the venue's digital contract, then paused, frowning deeply. He read something again, slower. Then he looked up. "Miss Quinn, according to the updated paperwork filed by the Rhymes family, the bride's mother is listed as deceased." The word landed like ice on my skin. Deceased. Dead. Erased. "That line is the justification for a 30% compassion discount," he continued, his voice tight with discomfort. "But it is fraudulent. This is a serious contract violation." I did not react outwardly. I felt everything inside me grow terribly still. Vivian Sorrell had not simply pushed me aside tonight. She had buried me on paper long before I arrived. Harlan set the documents down carefully, as if handling evidence from a crime scene. "Miss Quinn, there is something else." He clicked into a protected area of the venue system. "Our records show you are also an early shareholder of this chain." My breath caught. I had forgotten, or perhaps convinced myself it was too small to matter. But Harlan explained, "Early shareholders have authority to block or terminate any event involving fraudulent activity, misconduct, or reputation risk." Which, he looked at me steadily. "This situation clearly qualifies as—" I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger, power. A power I had not felt in decades, not since before my husband died, not since before poverty taught me to shrink. "What are my options?" I asked quietly. Harlan listed them without hesitation. "You may cancel the event immediately. You may levy penalties. You may report the Rhymes family for attempting to manipulate company policy, which could place them on our permanent blacklist." He paused, then added, "You have full authority to decide what happens next." At that moment, a microphone crackled through the air vent. The wedding music dipped, and I heard Celine's voice clear, bright, polished for her audience. "My parents died when I was young," she said sweetly, "but I am surrounded by love tonight." The lie echoed through the metal duct like a bell. My fingers tightened around the chair. The air felt thin. I had known she told that story, but hearing it at her wedding, with her mother sitting alive and humiliated in a staff room that was different, that was final. I looked back at Harlan. "Terminate the event," I said. My voice did not shake. It did not crack. It carried the weight of every night I had worked, every insult I had taken, every door that had closed in my face. Harlan nodded once. Not in shock, not in hesitation, but in respect. "As you wish, Miss Quinn." Piper stared at me, wide-eyed, breath catching in her throat. You are really doing this?" "For the first time in my life," I said, "I am standing on my own side." She looked at me the way young people sometimes look at older women, as if they suddenly understood that we were not always fragile, that some of us had clawed our way through years with nothing but stubborn love and blistered hands. I stood up, smoothing my dress, feeling something settle inside me, something solid and long overdue. For 68 years, I had swallowed every insult, every slight, every quiet erasure. Tonight, I finally chose to swallow none. And for the first time, the weight in my chest did not come from pain. It came from rising. I was still in the staff hallway when it happened, the first sign that something in the building had shifted because of me. The music stuttered mid-melody, cutting off as if someone had yanked the cord from the speakers. A second later, the lights flickered once, twice, then went black across the entire hall. A wave of gasps rippled through the guests, followed by nervous laughter, clinking glasses, hitting tables, heels scraping the floor. Then the panic rose. "What's going on? Is this part of the program? Someone fix the lights, my God, I cannot see anything." I stepped out of the hallway just enough to hear the commotion clearly. Emergency lights hummed on in thin red bars near the exits, casting the room in a dim glow that made everyone look like they were underwater. Then I heard Thatcher Rhymes. "This is unacceptable," he thundered, his voice breaking through the murmur like a storm cracking open. Vivienne was right behind him, her tone sharper than broken crystal. "Fix this now. Do you understand me? Now." I almost smiled. Not out of cruelty, out of recognition. These were people who had never been powerless a single day in their lives. Darkness was an insult to them, a disruption they could not control. And for the first time, I watched them be forced to sit inside it. Moments later, Harlan Dray stepped into the center of the hall, carrying a small flashlight that illuminated only his face and the folder in his hand. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke with the authority of someone who had nothing to fear. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "the primary client is terminating the event." The room froze. Thatcher barked, "Primary client? That is us. This is our wedding." Harlan shook his head calmly. "No, it is not." He turned the flashlight slowly, letting the beam fall on me at the edge of the room. The primary client is her. 100 faces swung toward me. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Some recognized me as the woman they assumed was homeless earlier. Others stared without recognition at all, because they had never bothered to look at me long enough to remember. To them, I must have looked like an apparition stepping out of the shadows. I walked forward slowly, my pulse steady, my steps sure. The dim red lights cut across my dress, illuminating every wrinkle, every faded seam, every sign of the years that had shaped me. I did not hide any of it. When I reached the center of the floor, I raised my chin. My name is Marella Quinn. Silence swallowed the room. I am Celine Hartley's mother. Gasps. Hands covering mouths, eyes widening. Shifts of guilt, discomfort, and realization. I paid for this place. The words struck harder than the darkness around us, but it was the final line that broke the room open. And according to your paperwork, I paused, letting the weight settle. I have been dead for years. The whispers exploded. What? Dead? Did they fake that? Who would do such a thing? Vivian's face drained of color. Thatcher's jaw clenched so tight I thought it would crack. Celine looked as if someone had punched the breath out of her. I turned toward her. You erased me, I said softly but clearly. You erased me on paper to save money. You erased me in your stories to seem perfect. You erased me tonight to please people who will never love you the way I did. I saw her swallow hard, her eyes glistening. I did not stop. I filled out your FAFSA forms when you were 17. I sat up nights learning how to help you get grants and tuition. I worked extra shifts to afford your deposit here. I bought shares in this company with the little I had. Every step forward you took had my fingerprints on it. And yet, I held up the fraudulent document Harlan had shown me. You told the world I died. Celine trembled. I just wanted a perfect day, she whispered. I stepped closer, stopping only a few feet from her. I was judged every day, I said, so you could pretend you did it alone. She reached out slightly, as if to touch my arm, but stopped halfway. I looked at her, the child who once hugged me after my night shifts, the young woman who now wished I were gone. You wished I never existed, I said, my voice steady. Tonight, I grant you that wish. And then I turned my back to her. I walked toward the exit, heels clicking softly against the polished floor, each step cutting through the stunned silence. Behind me, I heard the first choked sob escape her lips. Then, Mom, please wait. Her voice cracked. I did not look back. The doors closed behind me with a soft thud, sealing the night and our relationship exactly where it belonged. The morning after the wedding, I woke up before dawn, the sky still a heavy shade of blue. My body felt sore, as if I had been carrying a weight for decades and finally set it down. I made myself a cup of instant coffee and sat on the edge of my bed, half expecting the world to still be sleeping. But it was not. By sunrise, my phone was vibrating itself across the table. Messages, missed calls, notifications I had never seen in such numbers. At first, I thought something terrible had happened, another illness, another tragedy that life had thrown at someone I cared about. But when I opened the first message, a link filled my screen. A video. The video. The moment I confronted Celine, the paperwork, the declaration that I had been declared dead for a discount, the entire hall watching, my voice steady as I said, "Tonight, I grant you that wish." The clip had gone viral. Headlines everywhere. Bride fakes mom's death to get wedding discount. Groom's family erupts in scandal after mother of bride shuts down event. The invisible mother who refused to stay dead. People had opinions too many, too loud. Some defended Celine, most did not. The comment sections were filled with mothers who had scrubbed toilets, worked double shifts, carried families on their backs, women who recognized my hands as their own. Then came the fallout for the Rhymes family. Their business, an investment firm Thatcher's father had built over 20 years, started bleeding clients in a matter of hours. Several partnerships publicly distanced themselves. One article called them a walking PR disaster with generational arrogance. Reporters dug into their past, uncovering patterns of entitlement, that had never seen daylight before. And Vivienne Sorel, the internet christened her with a title that spread like wildfire: Monster in Law. Her flawless image cracked under the weight of her own words from the wedding, replayed in clips online. She doesn't belong in the photos. Celine did not escape the wave either. Her job in public relations ironically terminated her contract for ethical concerns. Thatcher left her within a week, issuing a statement so cold it made headlines on its own. I was unaware of my wife's deception. I cannot stay in a marriage built on dishonor. Friends stopped returning her calls. People whispered behind her as she walked down the street. The world she had built out of lies and shame collapsed overnight, and she was buried underneath the rubble. A few days later, Piper Wynne messaged me. "People are supporting you, ma'am. They're on your side." I stared at her words, the gentle kindness behind them, and felt something tighten in my chest, not pain this time, but an ache of gratitude. A stranger had shown me more humanity than my own blood. But when the house went quiet again, the doubts crept into the corners of my thoughts. Was I too harsh? Did I ruin her life? Am I cruel for letting the truth have its way? I sat at my kitchen table, the silence pressing around me. That was when the memories returned, not as ghosts, but as witnesses. The door slammed in my face. The smell of bleach I never managed to wash off. The FAFSA forms covered in my trembling handwriting. The post where she pretended she had no family. The winter night when she hid behind Vivienne's voice. And then, the cruelest one of all. I wish she never existed. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. If I saved her now? If I protected her from the consequences of her own actions? Then I would be exactly what the paperwork said. Dead. Gone. A name she could use when convenient, bury when not. No, I whispered. If she wants a life without me, then she must live in the truth of that choice. I stood from the table, my spine straighter than it had been in years. It is not God punishing them, I said quietly to the empty room. It is their own words coming back home. And for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like mine. A week after the wedding, I walked into a small law office on the east side of town. The carpets were worn, the lighting dim, the air faintly smelling of old paper. It felt honest, real. Nothing like the sparkling lie I had walked through at Celine's venue. I placed a folder on the attorney's desk, every document I owned. My shareholder's certificate, my savings account records, the deed to my small house, insurance papers. Everything I had scraped together through a lifetime of work. I want to write a will, I said. The attorney nodded and began asking questions. Those cold, practical things the world forces us to decide when we are finally ready to stop pretending life is endless. When he asked about beneficiaries, I answered without hesitation. My assets go to a fund for women who clean for a living, I said. Custodians, widows, single mothers, women like I used to be. And your daughter? He asked gently. She will receive nothing. He paused, pen hovering. Are you sure? Yes, I said. For the first time in my life, I am sure. When I returned home, I sat at my dining table with a blank sheet of paper. I stared at it a long time before the words came. My letter to Celine. I wrote about the nights I came home from cleaning bathrooms, but still cooked dinner so she would not sleep hungry. I wrote about the FAFSA forms, how my hands shook but I filled every line so she could have a future. I wrote about the winter night when I brought her pastries and a sweater, and the door closed before I could speak. I wrote about the way she buried me on paper to look more polished. And I wrote about the moment she whispered, "I wish she never existed." Then I wrote the part that hurt the most. Being your mother was the greatest honor of my life. But to you, it seems I was only a stain you wanted to scrub away. I did not cry writing it. I thought I would. But the tears had been spent long ago, in hallways and bathrooms and empty bedrooms no one saw. Yet, I did not shut the door completely. At the bottom of the letter I wrote, "If one day you wish to return not for money, not for image, but for truth, the house at the end of Maple Street will open for you. It is small, and it smells like coffee and old wood and a lifetime of trying, but it will open if you knock with honesty. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in the envelope marked with her name. Whether she ever opened it was no longer something I needed to worry about. That evening, I sat on my front porch, the wooden boards warm beneath me. The sky was turning gold, the kind of soft amber that makes everything look gentle, even memories. In my hand was an old photograph, Celine, on her high school prom night, hugging me tightly, pride glowing on her face. The last time she held me without shame. The wind rustled the leaves, brushing against my shoulder like a hand. "Tonight they called me an intruder," I whispered. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight lift. I only did one thing. I breathed in the cool evening air. I stepped out of her story. I exhaled. And for the first time, I stepped into my own. Thank you, my dear ones, for sitting with me through this story. Some truths weigh heavy, but sharing them makes the burden a little lighter, and maybe, just maybe, helps someone out there feel seen, understood, or a little less alone. If my voice, my journey, or my hard-earned lessons touched something in your heart today, if you believe stories like these deserve a place to be heard, then I invite you, gently but sincerely, to stay with me. Subscribe to Grand Emma True Stories, a place where wisdom speaks softly, where pain becomes strength, and where forgotten women finally tell the truth the world tried to silence. Thank you for listening, sweetheart. Until the next story, stay kind, stay brave, and take good care of your heart.